Really are right smack dab in the middle of a major change of civilization, a major change that is moving from one entire epoch of humanity to another. This is said in different ways, so we are all pretty familiar with this in the Bay Area. But it's showing up in every little way in which we do what we do. And in the arts, for instance, most of us grew up in a school that taught us from the paradigm of the age of form. And what that means is that everything is taught from the outside in. So what is dance? Dance is a series of steps. And painting has rules, and there's all these different forms and rules that tell you what to do in order to create. And in fact, every little 2-year-old knows exactly what to do with a box of crayons. They do not need instructions. If you give them some art materials, they are going. And every little child knows what to do when the music comes on. They're dancing. It's when the teacher comes that they're told, no, that's not dance, this is dance. Do these steps. And just to extrapolate from that there's actually a native, inherent, intrinsic flow of creativity that happens absolutely in every human being. There is not a child that is without it. Is that true? Have you ever seen a child that doesn't have that joy and ability? And so we do too. But what happened was it was encrusted inside of a paradigm that said, no, this is what art is. Art is for elites. It's for this small group of people that we can identify by 4th grade, and they're the ones that can copy well. They're the ones that can make the picture represent what you already saw. And that's a paradigm that comes from the age of form, that art is about reflecting or representing what we already know. And what's emerging in our time is an age of energy and vibration and intuition. We know now that this solid chair is not really hard matter, that there is really no such thing as hard matter. Inside here are atoms. And if we took one atom and blew it up to the size of a football field, the nucleus would be the size of a tomato seed, and the electron smaller still. So what is that? What's there is an energy in motion, whirling and twirling energy. And that's why it's solid, just like you can't put your hand in the fan because the propellers are moving, even though if it were to stop, there'd be plenty of space. So everything is made solid through motion. And still, science looks further, kind of on its quest for the building block, the little tiny brick we're going to find that we can line up and make a building out of. And it looks further inside of the proton and the nucleus and the electron, and we get down to quarks. And then we go further still. And at the edge of science, which is string theory at the moment, there's the idea that actually what's there are filaments of energy. Strings, they're like filaments. And there is actually no dimension. There is actually not really the matter we're looking for. What we have is vibration and frequency becoming matter ultimately. So this is a very big shift, and it's happening in many different fields and the ramifications of it. In medicine, before, 50 years ago, 100 years ago, you were looking for the machine model, so you were trying to fix the parts in order to make the body well. And we'll just take this organ out and we'll insert this medicine and we'll turn the dial and it will be fixed. And there was an absolute refusal to understand the living system and the whole of the body in its field and its dynamic synergy that's beyond any of the parts. Well, that's shifting in medicine and in other areas too, in business and in economics. I don't think it's going to be a shock to tell you that the current economic systems are in a state of crisis, and that what we've been doing for the past few years is essentially bandages that aren't going to hold. The whole of the world is shimmering and trembling, about to change, and is changing, even now, in huge ways. And we may not even take this in and be aware of it to the degree that we have the capacity to do, because it's sort of neutralized into day-to-day. But for example, Copernicus, who obviously saw an entirely different view of the universe, and we think, wow, as soon as he announced that, everything changed. But in fact, 200 to 300 years after he died, there was a small group of people who knew what he was talking about. And everyone else was still living out the paradigm that had been there before. Do you see what I'm saying there? And the same in our times. There are revelations that Einstein had in 1910 that are not even integrated in the slightest into our society yet. But that's what's happening now, and the pace and the quickening of it is occurring through all of us. And so, as we work with and in experience any of the fields that we're involved with, we each have a part in shifting out of the way of being that we've been coming from and shifting into a way of being that's emerging. And we know what that means because it's intuitive. You know, in the age of form, we had to have all of the information in order to make a step. It's a linear left brain dominant epoch of time. And so it has a lot to do with information that needs A, B, C, D, and all the way through in order to take the next step. But the age that's emerging is an age of a whole brain, and it involves the integration of the left brain and the right brain into a wholeness. And that right brain capacity doesn't need ABC in order to get to the fact this is an apple. It sees it as a whole. It doesn't look at the front of the apple, the middle of the apple, the back of the apple, and say, ah, apple. It's there, it's whole. And the arts actually help us to activate the right brain. And we, I would say most of us, unless you went to amazing Waldorf schools or Ananda schools or some other place, grew up with a very left brain education that taught us that the right brain capacities of imagination and creativity and intuition were really not very important. It's like just your imagination, you know? But that's actually, in this era, the most important thing we have, because we're out of time for linear solutions in the larger picture of things. The ways in which we could have intervened to change the cataclysms coming in environmental breakdown, for instance, were probably about 10 years ago, if we were going to really forestall some things changing. And so it's an example of how we can't really solve the overwhelming complexity of what's happening here leaning on that left brain. We can't do it through linear solutions. We have to somehow make a shift into the part of us that can tap a solution in an instant, that can step into a way of knowing and being and allow a synchronicity to come into place that just says this is the next step. And I don't even have to understand all of why, but I know it is. And maybe I go forward this way, and then now I know I need to go this way. And it's instinctive and it's deep inside of us that information comes. And that's actually one of the most important purposes of the arts. The arts are not to create decoration on the cake. I mean, it's beautiful and it's wonderful to decorate with arts. But in an age of materialism, it was flattened into that. Like the purpose of art was frosting on the cake. If your budget had a little left over at the end, you could buy some draperies to match the artwork. And the purpose of the arts is really about awakening these higher levels of consciousness within us, letting the right brain come alive so that we can cultivate imagination and intuition and instinct. And when they're brought back together, we have a wholeness of mind that can access intuition on demand, essentially. So just wanted to put that out. That's what the perspective is, that really art has a tremendous power that has barely been tapped, but it is being tapped now. And that's what we're calling forth in everyone's art, whatever your particular place in this evolving story is to move into the place where the wholeness of your being can be brought forth. And the intuitive sensibility you have at the core of your soul can begin to be activated. So that's hopefully what you see a little bit of in this artwork. And it's also something that is what I teach in the classes that I teach when I travel, but also, as you'll see in the handout, there's an academy in Italy that is where we have actually many different programs in this, plus a certification in transformative arts, which is teaching people how to midwife creativity and bring it forth in themselves and others. And we're also working on establishing a satellite in San Francisco with Lori Marshall, and near Portland, Oregon as well. So it's burgeoning at this point. So I'd love to talk to any of you about this afterwards. But that's it for a little short spiel here about the whole approach here.